All right, it's 4 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to this Digital Summit presentation, Data-Driven Architecture, Charting the Course to the Digital Enterprise, which today is being brought to us by Darin Paton at Cornerstone Consulting. Darin has extensive experience in enterprise architecture and has worked with Abacus for a number of years, so really looking forward to his insight. My name is Melissa Craig, and I'm the regional manager of our US office. Thank you all again so much for joining. We've had a great first day to our digital summit and hope you all have been able to join some of the other presentations. Before I hand it over to Darin to get started on this, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping issues to keep today's event moving forward smoothly. You've probably heard some of these housekeeping if you have tuned in to some of our other presentations. In order to ask questions, the best way is to write your questions in the Q&A text facility. You should see that at the bottom of the Zoom window. And if you do, can I ask you to please address it to all participants so that everyone's able to see which questions have been submitted. We're going to try our best to get to as many of the questions as we can at the end of the presentation. And in addition to questions, if you have an interest in sharing an opinion or a comment, you can use the chat facility as well. Please note also today's event is being recorded, so if you need to leave early or if you have any local technical difficulties, everyone who is registered for the event will receive the recording and a link to download the slides in a few days. And I know will be helpful to some of our folks who are not in the same time zones and all of that. We've got some international presentations, so will be great to be able to see those later on. So Darin, if you're ready to go, I'll go ahead and ask you to start today's presentation.
For sure. Thank you very much for a wonderful introduction. And I hope everyone out there is safe and their families are doing well. I was on some of the presentations earlier this morning, and there's some really great information about Avolution and some of the things that they're doing, other customers are doing with it. It's very encouraging and enlightening to see. Just appreciative to being asked to present here. So I've spent a lot of years in enterprise architecture in a lot of different industries and through many different transformation projects. And I've been a customer since 2012 with a strong background in SAP as well as enterprise architecture. So that's kind of my little niche. So to get started here, a little introduction. I'm not here to teach you that which you do not know. I am here to deepen the wisdom that is already yours. So, it's important. Everybody's probably home working, most of us anyway. And it's an important time to encourage and edify one another. And I think this is a good time to share some experiences. What I've done over the last couple of years or 22 years in enterprise architecture. And I just hope that sharing some of what I've lived through, that you guys can just take it away and make it yours and make it better. So that's some of the things that I'm trying to do here. Other things, of course, is, in this presentation, I've kind of accommodated for many different roles and the maturity of EA across the various audience here. So, some of it may not pertain to you, and so you can just close your ears or whatever you need to do. Some of the important things that I'll also talk about is that, foundational to enterprise architecture, of course, is a whole maturity. So, you got to have the right people, the right competencies, processes in place. And of course, you can put those in very quickly and in an agile fashion. So, and the last thing I kind of want to do before I get going here is that, I'm going to take you through a data-driven architecture to support road mapping for a digital enterprise. And some things to take into consideration, some things to maybe go and do some homework with. And one thing to keep in mind is that the presentation, I used Abacus pretty much for everything. And you got to remember it's just a tool. There's a lot of things that have to be in place to support the tool. but the tool is definitely a cornerstone. So let's get going here, because I got a lot of slides and a lot of material, and last time I'm a little too long, so I got to pick her up. So the perfect storm, a digital perspective. You know, we look at all the things that are happening here, and COVID-19, you're seeing tons of change happening out of COVID-19. You know, the resilient supply chain that had to be put in place. You know, people started needing to have to work at home and having to be able to manage people at home, and the mobility capabilities that have been introduced. So all these companies went into sort of a survival mode and really got the important things that needed to be pushed out, executed well. So hats off to a lot of the companies. You know, and Gartner, basically, they've come out with an article that we are in a perfect storm of application modernization. So all these technologies, all these methodologies that are coming down the pipe, kind of flows into Gene Ross's Design for Digital. And if anybody hasn't read that book, you know, it's a very practical read. I sat down in 4 hours and hammered about 100 pages out, and it's about 160 pages, right? So, you know, it's a very, very forward-thinking book, and once you pick it up, I think you'll just keep going with it. And you know, they talk about 5 building blocks to actually design your business for digital. Okay. And they talk about, you know, ensuring that you have a good operational backbone or core. And what that means is that all your core processes that run your business today, there should be operational excellence around those processes, you know, typically before you start on designing for digital. Okay. So these are things, and she recommends some ways to get around that. So it's a real good book on how. Other parts of it are shared customer insights. So talking more with your customers, getting engaged with your customers. So that's why you see a ton of technology around customer experience popping all over the places, because they want to start taking in all the customers' experience so that they can start finding out, okay, what are the customers thinking our value? How can we grow our revenue and transform our business? And how can we bring customer to a point where they feel there's value in our organization? And next part of that would be digital platform. So that's all those technologies that Gartner's talking about, the perfect application modernization. So perfect storm for that. Another one would be the accountability framework. So there's got to be some accountability in terms of being able to design for digital and making sure that, you know, we're going to be pushing out this new technology, new business processes, new capabilities. We need to be able to do that quickly, and we need accountability in there. And of course, you know, we're going to need some sort of external developer platform to be able to help do this quicker and to build off of other people's knowledge and digital assets. So, you know, and the last part of this I'm going to talk about is A Future is Faster Than You Think by Stephen Kotler and Peter Diamandis. So what I'll say about this is once you pick up this book, you are not going to put it down. You know, the way things are going, the things that I didn't even know that have already started are amazing. You know, flying cars, things like already doing 3D printing of flesh, right? So I think MIT, I got an email the other day, they just printed a set of miniature lungs, and they're actually testing that with the COVID virus. Other things would be just in the biotech world industry, a lot of the integration into people's thoughts, increasing people's lifespan, getting into the whole AI. Things like Tony Robbins has actually created an AI of himself that has the same speech pattern that his wife can. He doesn't even know that it's him or not. So a lot of these things that are coming down the pipe that are just out of this world that are going to impact us going forward. So we're going to see a lot of change in the next decade, and it's going to be pretty incredible. And so why do I talk about all this stuff? It's because it's going to impact EA as well. So I'm going to go through this, and let's just take it as we go, and go through this. So I think part of this is just working smarter, and of course managing or negotiating your scope. And I've heard that a couple times in the other presentations that we've had, but putting in place a data-driven architecture is something that's going to be required for the future. So in most places I go into, 90% I would say, don't have a central repository of data. It's disparate, it's all over the place. There's no real EA tool per se. And there's reasons for that within the organization. And it's very manual. So I continuously see the use of unstructured Word documents, Visio diagrams, Excel spreadsheets to manage, put together a Visio diagram, which then gets aggregated and consolidated into a PowerPoint slide deck, which is basically good for one point in time. And so the next quarter, the next year, I see the EAs just going around doing that again. And so these are just things that I observe, and it might be a little subtly different, but and all in all, it's a lot of manual work. So the EA this is the EAs helping to prioritize and manage getting the right information to the right peoples at the right time. And there's definitely an opportunity here to accelerate this. And why would we do this? Well, there's a number of things that are key to that. We can spend more time building relationships with our customers, because ultimately a lot of the time I've seen it's a tug of war between the business and IS. It would be nice, and I've seen a lot of places where the relationship's very strong too. So give and take there. So, but we could spend more time on building relationships to innovate. We could provide the thought leadership that we're there to do, and align strategy to, some of the corporate priorities and that sort of thing is critical. So, and part of that is putting together a world-class experience for your customer, and your stakeholders, reducing costs and risks and just being faster, but a lot of this stuff we've got to remember, it's about working smarter. So we don't want to try and do it on our own. And depending on where you are in your maturity, you just want to make sure that you just tack on as much as you can do. So I'm going to walk through some of this stuff and automate it as much as you can. So some of the prerequisites for charting the course, I would say, is, engage a stakeholder, and depending on the size of your organization and your maturity, start small and just do enough architecture, minimal viable product, right? And do it in sprints, and focus on a story. Engage partners to support you on your journey to, put together a roadmap. And if going back to Jean Ross, she said, well, when it comes to the digital enterprise, it's hard to define what the end state looks like, because it's going to be very quick and very fast moving and changing very often. So there's a lot of challenges that we have in front of us. Assemble some foundational data if you haven't already, and these are the key ones for me: organization, capability, application, information. Okay. Think about some OCM, some organizational change management. So when you go through this, there's going to be a lot of learning, a lot of changes within the stakeholders, business community, perhaps in IS, because what you're going to also try to do is be able to increase the performance of your data quality processes. And so everybody asks, okay, we put all this data together, but how do we keep it fresh? Well, these are the processes that you need to think about as you're doing it. And I'll give you a great example is that projects, right? They'll put together their design documents, their solution architecture documents, and a lot of them are unstructured, Visio diagrams and a Word document. Some things to do there is to define the templates for the solution architects and business architects to say, fill in these templates. And by the way, after you filled in those templates, you can cut and paste them into your Word document and write all the procedures around it for you, right? So you need to help them make their job easier, as well as make your job easier, and integrate those into existing processes. And that's just one instance of how you could do that. So, those are things that you need to keep in mind, and I heavily focus on make sure you manage your scope. So when you think about your scope and what you're doing, just completely around that scope. So, when you talk about the organization, the capability, the application, and the information you're pulling together, only around the scope of your stakeholder, and that is all. Try not to boil the ocean because that's where things will go south on you pretty quick. And when people keep on asking you to add some additional attributes in because they want them, well, that's where you gotta kind of say, well, we'll do that maybe on the next iteration. But you gotta have some governance in here to kind of make sure you're focused on the right priority things, okay? So, here's some examples, within the Abacus Studio, some of the core capabilities, the organizational structure, and the applications, right, that are part of that. So, and as you start to build out these catalogs, you put only enough information that you need to put in there, and relationships that you need to put in there that are required. Like for instance, I started with the Avolution meta model, and I tailored it for what I needed for a small scope of work, right? And for those that don't know what a business capability is on the phone call today, a business capability is what the business does, not how it does it, okay? So it has procurement, it does procurement, it manages purchase orders, it does financial accounting, it produces products, it sells products, it delivers products. Those are instances of that. And there's core capabilities, supporting capabilities. And I put in digital capabilities, and that's a bit of a controversial thing because some people think that they're digital enablers, and they definitely are, but there's around capabilities, you have to have the right competencies, you got to have the right information, you got to have the right processes in place, and those are all the things that you kind of need in place to be able to operate those capabilities. So how mature you are in them will define the risk that you have for various projects. So I put them in as capabilities, and some people might disagree with that, but at each organization, it's different. Okay. So we're going to talk about charting the course now, and this is a high level process. And basically it starts with envisioning the future, which basically from a corporate future perspective and from a business area perspective, and making sure that they're aligned. Assess and prioritize business capabilities is around, you know what the future needs to look like, and now we got to say, okay, let's prioritize what we need to do internally and externally. Then we get into a workshop to produce a roadmap, and I'll go into more about that. Then we put together a business case, and we may want to prototype or mitigate high risk scope. And then we evaluate and refine the business case and roadmap based on the prototype evaluation or some other things that have come up. Okay, so we're gonna focus on envisioning the corporate future and how we align with it, and to do that, it's we're looking on the leadership, the employees, partners get into play there, and it's ensuring that there's alignment amongst those. And there's a number of things in the envisioning the future that you need to take into consideration. Certain ideas, which turn into experiments, which leads into a significant change for the business. Could be a whole new business model. So there's three categories that I've kind of put into place there. Are transform, which basically is introducing a new business model or value chain, and based on that, you might have new capabilities, and it's basically going to provide new revenue stream for you. So, or be a competitive advantage. And an example of that might be, there's some companies out there already that are no longer buying manufactured parts. They're 3D printing them. Okay, so that's a competitive advantage that some organizations might have. Another area is optimize, and that's around the operational backbone or the core of your business. And that's to improve the productivity and capability performance. So, we see that a lot of changes throughout our organization today. That's what they do. Okay, we could do this process better, faster, cheaper, right? And that's the whole business case around it. Let's optimize it and let's push towards operational excellence. So that's kind of what that's pushing towards. And then extending your business processes where you might end up with new outcomes. For instance, you might have your supply chain logistics. There could be someone that's delivering a product from A to B, and you introduce IoT in there to actually track that order. So now you're building trust in with your customer to ensure that he knows where things are right away. Okay, so what are some tools that we can start to prepare for the Envision? Here's one. Here's a capability model, and basically it's going to provide you with a couple things. There's a couple LEDs on here. On the bottom left-hand corner is value, and on the bottom right-hand corner is maturity. So before envisioning the future for the business area, it's important to look through your capabilities to see, okay, where are some opportunities that we can optimize, extend, and it could be transform. I might add a new capability on here, right? And assuming that you have some of the information available now, you can start measuring it based on these value and maturity ratings, which I'll talk about in a minute. But if you don't have those, how do we objectively measure those, and you might have to bring in a partner or a consultant that can help you measure these value and maturities objectively. And basically just based on how these were measured, these were based on a capability handbook that was produced a couple of years back, and Gartner purchased them. And I've got a link in the appendix, so when they send out the PowerPoint, you'll get that information. So as part of this, the value is rated on a couple of dimensions about, do you provide a world-class client experience? Does the customer absolutely love your product and your interaction with your company, right? And how does the capability measure up towards your strategic goals and objectives? And are you investing in that capability today? And based on those measures, and this handbook tells you exactly how to measure those, right? Is that you can come up with the value and how important it is to your business value chain. And that will basically tell you the priority of that business capability. The next part of that, the right-hand bottom corner, is the maturity. And the maturity is based on a couple other dimensions. It's basically based on people, process, technology, and I added a fourth one called data. People is how competent are your people and mature are your people in executing this capability. Could be a new capability and they're just not there yet, right? How optimized are the processes? How well does the technology support, or do you have a million manual processes that are outside the technology because the technology doesn't support it? Or you just don't have all the data you need to be able to execute that capability properly. So once you have these values and maturity, your stakeholder can start looking at these and start making some focus, or setting some focus on certain capabilities he would like to improve. And he'll probably throw something out there like, if you guys have any other innovative ideas, we want to hear about them. Okay. So the next part of this is about ideas. And, honestly, you can empower your employees and you can let the entire organization, your customers, your partners, start to fill out a ton of ideas to empower the organization to just get better at what they do. And I know a lot of companies already have this idea gathering. And if not, then this is something that you might want to, just spark the idea with your leadership in terms of putting this together. And if you do, well, have it, well, then you just consume it like some other presentations talk about, just consume it from the system of record or the single source of truth and get that into your repository. This template is actually based on something that comes right out of Abacus. Of course, I tailored it a bit to add a few more columns. What category is it? Is it transform, extend, optimize? So you can start to see, okay, what kind of idea is this? You could have some scoring in terms of feasibility and, in terms of what stage it's at. You might park it, you might not, and scoring it. So, these are some things that you can do. And if, of course, you don't have this, then you could just set the scope again, just around your business stakeholders, maybe some other people that know that business really well, that can help to flush out some of the ideas. Okay, but get people engaged to start thinking about some of these ideas to prepare to envision. Okay. So, and here's some other, I just threw out a couple different views of this. You can look at it by desired outcomes and goals, and start to drill down on some of this information. If, and of course, This is all interactive, and if you want a demo, you can reach out with me later and I can take you through it. Same with this. This is by capability. Start mapping your ideas to business capabilities so that you can focus on ideas that are only relevant for your stakeholders. You know, and there was, I think, another comment in another presentation that was done, you know, and as I show these things on the board, the question is that how many executives actually use this stuff? So, you know, and it depends. I used to, you know, I once in my lifetime set up a practice in business analytics. And what I've come to know is that they want a certain dashboard or exception reporting so that they can pick up the phone and start asking questions. They don't typically drill down into analytics. Okay, so your C-levels, your VPs, they're going to be picking up the phone and talking to somebody. They're highly unlikely going to drill through a lot of these graphs. Now, there are exceptions to that, but generally speaking, I don't see the C-levels doing that because they don't have the time. Okay, so this is where we get, you know, your team, the business team has basically said, okay, you know, we've taken on all these ideas, we've looked at our capabilities, you know, we kind of have an idea of what the future might look like internally. Now, time to engage a partner. Now, what are some ways you can engage a partner is that you can, you know, a lot of these companies have value engineering teams, you know, they have road mapping teams, enterprise architecture teams, that can actually come in here with a whole team and help get into workshops. And you can start going through the workshops to start pulling together a roadmap. Now, it's good that partners come in because they have experience in other industries as well as your industries. They have access to different customers. They've got a series of different knowledge bases, tools that'll just accelerate the whole process, you know, just tenfold. Okay, so it's important that you engage them. Now, what they're going to do is they're going to come in and they're going to workshop this, and this is what we've seen other customers do, you know, and they're going to take your input and they're going to gel that into a roadmap, and they might even come up with, this is what we kind of see the timelines looking like, and you know, when things are going to happen, and you know, they can start going down that road, and you got to just take that with a grain of salt. They've done it before and they were successful in doing it, but it may not align to your goals and strategies. So you just got to take that with a grain of salt. So, you know, one thing I would suggest as EAs is that, again, for your partners, give them a set of templates and say, can you provide us this information back when you perform your roadmap? So, you know, give us a clear vision of, you know, what came out of this workshop, you know, how you know, some of the goals that are coming out of this, what are some of our desired outcomes, you know, some of the business capabilities that are going to be impacted, new competencies or weak competencies, some of the applications, technology, information, those kind of things, that just catalogs of information that are going to come out of these workshops, of things that we're going to need going forward in terms of the planning. And these may not be in our existing repositories, so it's important that the partner provide those to us, okay? So what came out of that was basically a lot of information that went to the partner. So now they're going to go away for a while, and they're going to put together a plan, and it's going to be a high-level roadmap, an action plan that they feel needs to be the priority. Even though they took your priorities, they might disagree with those and come up with something else. They're going to come together with some high-level benefits that they're going to throw by you. right? So they're going to go away for a while. And in the interim, it's a good time to assess your business capabilities and prioritize these things. So you can start looking at some of the goals and desired outcomes that came out of that meeting and just quickly go through them. This isn't taking a lot of time, but start to quickly go through and reprioritize if you need to. So some tools there you might look at are, mapping corporate desired outcomes to goals, and the value of these are, making sure you're still in alignment with the corporate vision as well as the business area alignment, and that it supports, these goals are going to end up supporting the business case, right? And it's going to help with the post-project review, right? So, a lot of this information can be reused in the future, right? So this is some of the things that you can end up using. The other thing is starting to go through your capability map and, to successfully deliver this program, these are all the capabilities that we're going to require. And again, it's a first pass. You're looking for big move-in items. It's for planning and alignment to see if there's any gaps in any capabilities, that things that you don't do now that you will need to do in the future, or any high risk capabilities that you're going to need in the future. And of course, you're going to need to start mapping these things out. So when do you want to do them, right? So very quickly say, oh yeah, we want to do this in 2020, 2021, 2022, whenever. And these are the business capabilities that are going to support those goals, right? Which will then roll up to those desired outcomes. So there's some lineage there that is just going to happen, right? And then honestly, if it's a small enough scope, this happens very quickly. Oops. So the next thing is that, things come back from the partner, and you have IS in the meeting, you have the business in the meeting, and now it's to create alignment, to start making sure that you are aligned. And what's going to come out of this very quickly is an aligned roadmap, because there are going to be things that IS want to do, right, that the business don't want to do, and that the partners are going to do things in a certain order that the business really don't want to do in that order. So, it ends up coming into this workshop and leaving with a harmonized, unified roadmap, which at the highest level, I'm just going to show you this, might look at these timelines. And the thing is this will just help with portfolio planning and analysis of risk and that sort of thing of, what capabilities are required when, what technologies need to be in place, all those kind of things, what competencies need to be there. And it just gives you an idea. Now, my reluctance to use this is that the PMO does this already. So you don't want to repeat what the PMO does. So you might minimally do it within Abacus and then just hyperlink it to your PMO site, just to say, there's the rest of the story, right? And just pull out the information that you need as part of this first information. So it's about just working smart and within your scope. So, and we talked about identifying high risk areas. And one way to do this is take your maturity for your capabilities, if you have it, and start mapping that over top of the capabilities for the first year project. So the first iteration of this program, year one, you got a project that's running, could be a program that basically identifies all the capabilities required for that. And what you do is you look at that and you go, okay, we got a couple of hot zones here where the capabilities are just not mature due to whatever reason, and we talked about the different dimensions of a capability in terms of measuring its maturity: process, technology, people, and data. So any one of those might turn this red or orange or green or light orange. So you need to look at it and determine, okay, where are the things of high risk that we need to mitigate now before we get into the execution phase, okay? So you get back and you start, the partner's gone away and he's come back now with a business case. And he's going to vet that business case with the business owners. And, you know, the roadmap is still the roadmap, but now you've put the business case in place and all the things that need to be in place. Hopefully the partner is giving you all the templates so you can feed that into Abacus and start, you know, reevaluating maybe some risk. And then you're going to look at the high risk items, and in parallel, you might want to prototype some of those in terms of mitigating those risks or learning more about those risks. But you want to do those fairly quickly. And one thing I'll just note about the business case is that typically when a partner comes in and they give the business case to the business go, oh no, we're not committing to those benefits. What we're going to do is we're going to, you know, review that, and we're going to refine it before we're going to submit it. So they're going to take a first cut. Now the business goes away, takes a look at that business case and starts looking at how to refine it. At the same time, you've got some people that are going to do prototypes. And at this time, you know, there's not a lot you can do except keeping the pulse on this prototype and just monitor it for any potential gaps and that sort of thing. And make sure you got your architectural governance in place, and, you know, just help with any barriers just to help the team get through what they need to get through very quickly. And then you get to the point where you evaluate the prototype, and, you know, whatever comes out of that prototype, you got to fill that back in to refine and submit the business case. And you know, in worst case, you might have to redefine some of the roadmap. So, but at that point, you know, you've got to a point where you can submit the business case to governance team to review it. And so now this all goes to the governance team now, and hopefully the EA is on that team in terms of the entire corporate portfolio. And, you know, you might be able to do like this based on the data that you have within Abacus. You can start spitting out graphs like this. Now I overlapped, you know, the grid on it major, but the bubble diagram is Abacus, but then I overlapped just the grid, which basically says, you know, low, if you got a high impact and low complexity for the project, it's usually a digital asset or a quick win, and it's going to be agile, and you're going to do it quick, and you're going to get some high impact right off the bat. If it's a high impact, high complexity, it's usually a major impact, a major project. It might be laying a new foundation for a new capability that supports digital assets. It could be, you know, an upgrade to the core. It could be implementation of an ERP. Non-discretionary thankless are usually regulatory. Fill-in and then experiments. Those come from your ideas that you may want to experiment to start. Might take a little longer to do, but you know, at this point in time, there's low impact. So some things just based on NPV over 5 years, just to help the governance team to make decisions. Some other ones are to look at your capability map and start looking at how many projects or programs are impacting your capabilities, so you can start to resource up where you need to, or you know, start communicating to partners that they're going to have to fill in some of these gaps. And this is all done in Abacus behind the scene. And I actually used the visual composer scripts to actually put in a lot of these colors and numbers that count the number of projects per capability, and then provide a heat map over top of those numbers, okay? And of course, it's drilled down. You can start looking based on asset and plant maintenance, which is in the middle, that capability, the incoming are supporting capabilities, ideas that contribute to that capability, or projects that are improving that capability. Some of the outgoing things that come out of that are the goals that it supports, some of the capabilities it supports, some of the applications it uses, some of the competencies that are required, you know, some of the information utilized or projects impacting. So all this data that is centralized, mapped, provides massive value. And over the long term, you can start looking at your total cost of ownership. And I just used the Abacus Studio analysis financial, which is, you know, that little dialogue up in the top right corner. And it basically will define your application TCO and even capability TCO if you put in all the underlying numbers. And then you can start to look at your application portfolio and your time over 5 years to see how your applications are going to evolve over time. In the middle is your total cost of ownership. And of course, you know, I made these numbers fictitious. They're based maybe logarithmically on the right numbers, but you know, they are fictitious. So just to keep it in mind. So key takeaways, because I'm running out of time. Start assembling your data, because the future is faster than you think, right? And the future will rely on your data, and it won't come from unstructured data and Excel spreadsheets. I think you're going to have to put a little structure and quality around it. Maintain your stakeholder relations. And there's a book called Nudge that I highly recommend. And what it does is it tells you about nudging your stakeholders. It's kind of like, you know, if you tell your kids to stop eating candy, they're probably not gonna. But if you keep putting fruit on the front counter, they're probably gonna eat it if it's the fruit they like. So that's all about nudge. Engage your partners for support, because most of the times they're gonna do it for free. Build the freshness of data into existing processes and automate repetitive tasks, okay? So in closing, without data, the future is futile. And ultimately, you know, we're not far away from AI providing some of the recommendation, gap analysis, risk analysis in the future. They already have done AI that beats chess masters around the world. Sure, they're going to beat EAs in the future. So, you know, it doesn't mean we're out of work, because there's a lot of stuff to do, right? But I even see that AI is probably going to select projects in predicting the right outcomes based on the right outcomes, and could potentially even start recommending business strategies. But, you know, that's for the future to tell. And but the data is definitely going to be foundational. So thanks. And that's all I have. And I got 12 minutes for Q&A.
Excellent. Thank you, Darin. And yes, please continue to go ahead and submit your questions. We do have a few questions to start with already. They look like really good questions. So Darin, I'll go ahead and read those to you, and we'll continue reading as they come in. So the first one is, when it comes to road mapping or planning with portfolio and business capability, its business value and maturity value, on which level do you prefer to do an impact analysis? Do you think that it's best to stay on an application and technology level, or is it better to go deeper and start analyzing the interrelations between the applications and other things?
So again, you know, I would prefer to do it at level, you know, in my mind, it's level 3. Business capability is looking at all aspects, especially on the maturity side, is, you know, looking at process, looking at technology, looking at people, looking at information. And I think it's important to look at that, you know, and if you can't do it objectively, sometimes, you know, you might, on the first iteration, you might have to do it intuitively, right? So I hope that answers your question, but that's a great question.
Yeah, excellent. So another part to that question is, in terms of portfolio analysis for master plan, do you feed or provide data to analyze so that the prioritization can be more accurate?
Um, yeah. Again, it's all a maturity and it based on your size of your organization, but absolutely, right? It's going to be iterative. You're going to go back around and you might find an issue with your data quality in terms of providing a clear metric. And you have to make sure that you just build that into the process, right? There are going to be pains along the way, but as you build out that data quality and completeness, um, you're going to start to see the fruits of some of those efforts, right?
Great, thank you. Another question, how were you able to engage stakeholders into participating in the process? How do you suggest that people go about doing that?
So yeah, that is a very, very good question. Yeah, because we deal with politics every day, don't we? And sometimes IS, don't get too much in bed with the business and all those kind of things. And thankfully, I'm a consultant, so sometimes I can weave around that a bit. But honestly, honesty is the best policy. And if you got to take one for the team, you got to take one for the team. But, doing the right thing from a business and trying to bring the business, I think that's part of our role, is to bring the business and IS together, into harmony if you can, right? Always ends up sometimes in a really good place. And I've been in places where it was not a good place to be. So it doesn't always happen. You know, as a consultant, I say that depends.
Sure.
Right,
Okay.
right.
So continuing along with the theme of stakeholders, what are some common queries that people can expect to get from stakeholders?
Uh, some in terms of I don't know the context there. So I might have to guess
I
at
think,
that.
maybe probably just, what types of things would stakeholders want to see? What types of things would they be interested in learning about from
So,
an EA practice?
so I'll tell you one thing. They really get pumped up, honestly, with technology, right? Yeah, and probably all of you out there are probably all on board with that. They deal with their operational day to day, and that's a grunge. And I can remember talking to a VP one time, and he goes, "Oh, I can't wait for this. We get to do the fun stuff coming up, right?" And basically, sometimes bringing in your partners, and they want to know what the art of the possible is because they're in so much over their head into operational day to day pain that they don't even know what's going on around them, right? I told my kids the other day, they were already building flying cars, and they're building a hyperloop train that goes from, Vancouver down to Miami in an hour, right? So, these things are already, you know, being prototyped, right? And you start looking at all these things and most of these people don't even know things like that are happening. And so they really get pumped up about those kind of things. But then you've got to reel them back in and you got to say, okay, how does this help your business? Right? So you're going to have to push uh, and, and challenge your business stakeholders a lot, not to get too focused on the technology. You say, great, that's a capability that you're looking for. Now, how does that help your business, your desired outcomes, or something that's completely innovative and transformational to your corporation as a whole? And by the way, take that up the ladder and throw that out to them to see if they're going to bite, right? So if you read Jean Ross's Design for Digital, she gives you a whole framework and she gives you some of the how in terms of how to work around that, right? So you're going to have to work with your customer on that, but you got to reel them back in around practical business capabilities and that sort of things, right? You can't get too far out there, right? So.
That's helpful. Great. Okay, so another question. In your view or your experience, can the scope of EA work change faster in early iterations? So maybe it's changing as fast as a change per iteration. And then as there's more knowledge and understanding of the change at hand, is the scope more permanent?
Yes. Yes. So as you flip through the scope, yes, it becomes more permanent. Absolutely. Even as you're going through the roadmap, each iteration is going to start to build a more solid foundation of what the future is going to look like. The other things to that is it's super important to start thinking about those operational processes that I talked about, especially around data quality and keeping the data fresh. So, you know, you've got two streams here. You got people working on the roadmap, but you got some people that are going to have to start working on that operational model, right? To start making sure that that data quality remains in place, right?
Sure. Okay, excellent. Um, so what were the driving forces behind choosing a priority matrix for program planning? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So, you know, a lot of companies I'm in, um, it ends up being quite, you know, there's only so much budget in corporations, right? They can only do so much. Um, and there's a lot of subjectivity to it, you know, and you know, hopefully in the future one day AI will take that all out of it, right? So, you know, it's one model, you're right. You know, you've got the data. The message I was trying to promote today is that, you know, getting your data in a central repository gives you the capability as an EA team to be able to deliver many different views. And the views you can produce are very dynamic. Even, you know, moving from doing my models in Abacus Studio to Abacus Enterprise, like the savings of time was ginormic for me, right? In terms of even just learning time, like, you know, 3 weeks, boom, I was up and running and I could do pretty much any model I want to, but it's that underlying data that you rely on. Now, why did I choose that bubble diagram? Well, that's just one diagram that can help people in their decision making in terms of portfolio. And usually it's driven by NPVR. If the return on investment is not 2 years, usually it's going to get dumped unless there's some extenuating circumstance, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, and we're coming right up on the time. I think we may have time for one more question. And someone asked, could you please revisit or repeat the definition of the extend option or classification for initiatives as an extend, transform, and optimize?
Okay, so transform, okay, is basically, you know, increased revenue. It's a new business model, you know. So instead of owning hotels, I don't own any hotels. I just let you rent them out, you know. So the extend is coming out with a new outcome, a competitive advantage, let's say. Okay, so what you might end up doing is extending an existing process to put something new into that process to get trust from your customers. Okay, and then there's the optimize, which basically is going to be optimizing your existing processes. So robotic process automation, great example, right? So you can automate some of your processes so that, you know, it takes a lot of pressure off your existing operational day-to-day people, right? So according, this presentation will go out, so you'll get all those definitions as well. So.
Excellent, great. And we're right almost at the time. And so thank you so much, Darin. It brings us to the end of this and